Alrighty, what's going on, guys? Quick announcement before we get today's video rolling. So finally got some new merchandise in stock up on the website. You guys have been emailing me, sending me messages for a while about the other merchandise, which unfortunately we're not going to restock until spring. But brand new design, we got Mondo Bass hoodies. Probably my favorite design that we've done to date. We've been working on these for a couple of months now. We've got the custom gyro patches, of course. We've got printed tags. And of course, the centerpiece, the Gyutaku artwork, which is Japanese fish painting. So yes, this was once a real bass that was put on paper, and now we put it onto apparel. So that is the whole idea behind the brand and these new hoodies, which we have in, of course, black. And we've got it in army green, so a little color change up. But guys, like I said, I will link the merch in the description below. And other than that, I hope you guys enjoy today's video. Alrighty guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. So today's video is going to be a little bit different than what you typically see on this channel, but it's a video that I really wanted to do for the end of the 2022 tournament season, and it's a recap of our season, how it went, the ups, the downs, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, the fun times, the not so fun times, all the memories, everything in between, and really just to reflect on all 15 kayak tournaments that we fished in 2022. You know, I would say if I had to pick, tournament videos are some of my favorite to create, to put up on this channel, and I think most of you guys really enjoy the tournament aspect of this channel and just showing exactly what goes into them, the travel, the experience, the fishing. And personally, tournament kayak fishing is probably one of my favorite aspects of kayak fishing. It's actually what got me started in the second year of owning a kayak. I fished my first tournament back in 2013. Just like the tournament aspect of catching a fish too, something that is totally different than when you're fun fishing. Hooking into a big fish on a tournament day, landing that fish, putting that fish on the board, getting a photo. Man, oh man, there is no rush like that. And I'll tell you what, it's the same as it was from day one to now. That exact rush, that exact same feeling is just amazing. So as far as the structure of this video today, we are going to go through every single tournament of 2022 that we fished. We're going to talk about each one, how we did, the pre-fish, the tournament itself, the baits that did well, if we won any money or not, some notable things that may have happened throughout that tournament weekend. And then after we're done talking about every single tournament, we'll go into some details that you may not see typically from, you know, kayak fishing videos or even my videos, but I'm going to tell you exactly how much we spent on tournament entry fees throughout the entire year. I'm going to tell you how much we won and if there was any profit or loss when you compare the two. Then we'll talk about the overall grade of my 2022 tournament season, let you guys know exactly how I think I personally did for this past season. And then to close out the video, we'll talk about next year. We'll talk about 2023, the tournaments we anticipate fishing, some new series, some travel, what lakes you can look forward to seeing on the tournament schedule for next year, and some of the goals we'll have going into next season. But let's just get right into it. First tournament of the year started way back in the beginning. I believe it was the first week of February, and it takes us right here in Northern California at a renowned fishery, Lake Shasta. It's always fun to get back with the crew for the first tournament of the year. You guys know the usual suspects who you'll see throughout this entire video. And there's a lot of anticipation for that tournament. Everyone was ready to get back into the groove. We all show up. We stay at the Bay Bridge Hotel right on Lake Shasta, a place we've been going for a long time. And I think the big thing about Shasta that was very different this time around compared to years before was the quantity. So this lake typically choked full of spotted bass. Smaller ones, you're looking at 1 to 2 pound spotted bass. It would be 50, 60 fish days for some people this time of year. But this time, much different. The story, the take home from practice leading up into the tournament was it was stingy, and catching 5 fish would be tough over a 2-day event. So that's what we went into the tournament with. You know, a couple of hints, caught some on a drop shot, caught some on a jig, just hoping to get 5 each day over 2 days. And day one, we decided to wing it, just go fishing. Sometimes that works out, but we were covering way too much water. We're spending way too much time on the motor, jumping spot to spot. I wasn't taking my time. And day one, first tournament of the year, we don't come in with a limit. So a little disappointing. It's always nice to come back and hang out with the fellas, talk about your tough day. That always helps with those tough results. Without catching a limit on day one, we basically put ourselves out of contention to win the tournament or even make a top 10. So day two, my mentality was just to go fishing, fishing, spend as little time on the motor as possible, and just take your time. And that's what we did exactly. And wouldn't you know, first spot we pull up into, and we got our limit, our 5 fish within a couple of hours. Throwing this little kayak finesse jig with a little general trailer, something a little more subtle, a little more discreet, less action, working this slowly on the bottom, taking our time, and we got bites, and we even culled up a few times. At one point, I thought I may have had big fish in the tournament, but that did fall short. But either way, we salvaged the day. We came in, I think, with the 3rd biggest bag on day 2 and jumped up a few spots and ended on a positive note. Stop number 2, this one was the big one and maybe one of the most memorable tournaments I've ever experienced in my life, and really just because of the stakes, the situation. And this was a Bassmaster Kayak Championship. Greenville, South Carolina takes us to Lake Russel, all the way in conjunction with the Bassmaster Classic on Lake Hartwell. This was a special one for multiple reasons. A, we got to travel with our good buddies Mike Ensign and Terrence Sullivan. Had a huge support from Sierra Nevada Brewery, who frequently make trips from the Chico, California brewery to the Mills River Brewery in North Carolina with a beer truck, shipping beer all the way across the country. And we were so lucky in that they were able to actually put our kayaks, Mike and myself's kayaks, in their beer truck and ship them across the country so that we could all, Mike, myself, and Terrence, fly in, not have to do the 40-hour drive. And it was a very comfortable way to travel across country for this tournament. So huge shout out to Sierra Nevada for helping us get not only our kayaks, but our rods, our gear, all of our accessories across the country. And man, besides the fishing, which we'll get into in a second, but what a trip that was. So much fun. Mike, Terrence, and myself, like I mentioned, we flew in to Greenville. It was kind of a chaotic week to say the least. Some amazing generosity and support from some people, including Chevy. Chevy hooked us up with a truck for the entire week, a Silverado LTZ, so Mike and I could travel together, put both of our kayaks in the bed. But yeah, landed in Greenville, got our rental truck, made our way to our Airbnb in Anderson, South Carolina, got some rest, and the next day drove way up north to Mills River Brewery, where our kayaks had landed just a few days prior. Picked up our kayaks, checked out the brewery. If you guys have never been to the Mills River Brewery, I highly recommend you check it out. Awesome place, great tour, great beer, awesome food. So we got our kayaks, we took them back down. Mike and I had 2 days of practice on Lake Russel, where the tournament would be held, a 2-day event, and it was kind of a dud. We tried multiple launches, we fished from sun up to sundown, and on our last day of pre-fish, I found a little bit of a crankbait bite on the other side of mid-lake, and that was our deal. That was what I had the most confidence going into the tournament with, was throwing a Fritz side 7. This guy right here in Ghost Minnow. We also caught a few on that kayak finesse jig with a chigger bug trailer. Caught some keyfish on that, but again, our main damage was done on the Fritz side 7. Flat-sided crankbait, great way to catch these fish. Lake Russell, spotted bass and largemouth bass. We were catching a mixed bag, and I think a lot of these fish were pre-spawn, moving bait into the backs of the creek. I mean, you could see some of these fish choking up these gizzard shad, and I think this bait presentation was just a perfect way to catch those fish in the backs of the creeks, in the backs of the pockets. And our day 1 was good. You know, we didn't crush it. A couple guys did, some 90, I think there was even a 100-inch bag, which was surprising for that lake this time of year, I was told, but did okay. We stayed in the hunt, we caught our 5. And day 2, you know, we knew we had to have an epic day 2. I'm talking maybe 20-25 pound bag for you boat guys, and then for a kayak guy, 90 to 100 inches to maybe make the top 10. And that was ultimately our goal going into this Bassmaster Kayak Championship, was to make the top 10, because the top 10 would get to go on the Bassmaster Classic Kayak stage and be presented with your top 10. So that was the goal. It looked like a long shot on day 2, but we grinded it out. We fished, we got some good fortune, we caught a few big ones, we fished clean, we put everything in the net that we hooked into. Solid day, nothing epic, but as Mike and I were driving home, kind of getting our thoughts together, getting ready to fly back the next day, we get a text from Bass and they tell us that we have made the top 10. I couldn't believe it, Mike couldn't believe it, and we barely squeaked in. We got 10th place, we got to go up on the Bassmaster Classic stage, and what a memorable moment, great trip, awesome tournament number 2, and a tournament, an experience that I'll never forget. Tournament number 3, we're back in California. We've made the trip back, the dust is settled, and the kayaks have actually shipped back from Mills River to Chico, which worked out perfectly because stop number 3 is a YAB Lake Oroville event right next to Chico, about 20 minutes away, so the timing of everything was perfect. Everyone made the trip up to Chico, kayaks made it safe and sound back to the brewery as well. Of course, when you're in Chico, we have to go to the Sierra Nevada Brewery brewery, which happened to be on St. Patty's Day weekend. And the funny thing too about this tournament was the entire crew actually had planned on making it up, except for Mike. Mike couldn't make it. And as we all got on the water for pre-fish the day before the tournament, we were texting in the group text saying the fishing was good and how we were excited to go to the brewery later. I think Mr. Michael got a little FOMO, as they call it. He made the trip up that morning. I bet you he probably even planned it the night before, but he made the trip up. He got into our on-site lodge and he tried to get a little fancy. He tried to pull a little scare tactic on me, which kind of an epic fail, Mike, no offense. But it was awesome to see that Mike made the trip. As always for these tournaments, we try to have a good time other than the fishing, so being right next to the brewery, having some good food, some good beverages is always a nice way to kick off the night before the tournament. On tournament day, we decided to just wing it, try a different part of the lake. We crossed over. Weather was a lot different. It was actually overcast and had some wind, but that actually helped the bite. And transitioning right from our Lake Russel tournament, that little Fritz Side 7 again was our main bait, our main player, and we caught a limit quite quickly, grinded it out through the rest of the day, had to deal with some semi-sketchy weather, caught a bunch of fish on that, nothing huge, had a fair finish, and just overall a solid tournament performance at Lake Oroville. Nothing to brag about, but much better than, we'll say, Shasta. Tournament number 4, we find ourselves on probably our favorite fishery in the country, the California Delta, and this is for the ABA Ironman Kayak Series, a new series that started this past year. 2-day events, big entry fees, big payouts, and I was really looking forward to this event because California Delta in the springtime, man oh man, it can be some pretty fantastic fishing, and it certainly did not disappoint. I pre-fished the days that we were allowed to, and I found one area in a community hole, Frank's Track. The water a little dirtier, but I found a lot of fish that I believe were on beds that you could not visually see, and my practice went really well. We were catching some numbers, we were catching some big ones. I even lost one that may have gone 8 or 9 pounds, and it was all on what we dubbed the cheater jig, which is one of my favorite baits on the Delta early spring. But that was our key bait for this tournament, blind casting it on high percentage areas that should have fish on bed. The big thing of this tournament was we had a solid performance. We had a good day 1, a good day 2. We caught our limit both days. We called up both days, caught a few really big fish, but it is spring on the California Delta and people sacked them. I think top 10 averaged over 90 inches a day. And shout out to Dutcher and Aldi who joined me for this tournament. We also enjoyed some quality time together at the Rusty Porthole right on the Delta, so shout out Rusty Porthole, can't go wrong there. And those guys sacked them up pretty good. Dutcher won big fish. Aldi, I believe, had a top 5. So, you know, we didn't do terrible in this tournament, but another solid finish. Limits both days, and just couldn't have that epic day like we hoped that would have propelled us into that top 5. Delta, ABA, stop number 4, finished. Tournament number 5, a specialty tournament, first specialty tournament of the year. And when I say specialty tournament, it's a different type of tournament, not a local trail, but this was actually the Nativewatercraft No Limit Big Bass Power Hour, a series that Nativewatercraft came out with this past year. They had tournaments all throughout the country, and the big thing with this tournament was it was an 8-hour tournament, one day. Every hour, the big fish of every hour would win $1,000. Over 8 hours, 8 big fish, 8 grand given out, and then it was also catching the most inches throughout the day. Bass had to be over 14 inches, but the overall winners would have the most inches, and the first place prize would be a brand new Slayer Propel 10. You know, this was an interesting tournament. Again, this is springtime. We get up there a day early. We do some pre-fish. I hadn't been there in a while. Big thing was a lot of fish on beds. We were able to trick some of those fish sight fishing with the Champ, nice crawfish imitator. I like this white with a blue back just because it's more visible in the water, and you can kind of get further from those fish and see if they suck it in by essentially disappearing. And they were throwing a little flatworm as well. That was more of a blind cast into high percentage areas that they should be bedding. You know, pre-fish was good. The only thing was this, again, was a big bass tournament. Big bass every hour, so we were looking for big bedfish, and I just did not find any big bedfish. Nothing that I thought would win an hourly fish. So that was part of the strategy in this tournament. So tournament day, we kind of scrap all the bed fishing deal, all the sight fishing, and we just go fishing into a few pockets, a few coves up north that had some fish the day before. And it started out slow, really slow morning, only caught a couple of fish. But with so many people in this tournament and this lake fishing kind of small, we decided just to grind it out there at least until 11 or 12 o'clock, and then we'd make a move. But as luck would have it, the fish moved into this little pocket, this little cove. There were schooling fish, combination of spot spots, largemouth and smallmouth, and they were chasing bait, and that is where we did all of our damage. All of our bites were on a 3.8-inch Kitech on a little 1/4-ounce jig head, casting that out, and most of the time this bait would actually just get hit on the fall. You just cast it right into that school, they'd eat it, and these were quality fish too. 15 to 17-inch fish. What a fun bite that was. Probably one of the best fishing days I've actually had all year as far as quantity and overall quality, and we got right in a hurry. But I think the biggest thing from this tournament was the controversy. We had a little controversy at the end, kind of brought it upon myself, but the thing was this tournament ends at 3 o'clock. So 3 o'clock, tournament's over, and we ended up hooking a fish at 2:59 in like 50 some seconds. So we get the fish in the boat, changes over to 3 o'clock, and we actually get our photo submitted by 3 o'clock and 33 seconds. So in the rule book for a lot of our local tournaments out here, YAKA, even some of the national tournaments like Hobie BOS, in the rules, when a tournament officially ends, say 3 o'clock, any fish submitted with 3 o'clock and X amount of seconds, up to 59 seconds, counts as 3 o'clock. Honestly, at the time, I didn't think much of it because I didn't even think we'd actually do that well in the tournament. I wasn't quite sure what the rule was for this specific tournament. One thing with Tourney X2, the app that we use to submit the fish, is when you create a tournament, they set the parameters so that with every photo that you submit, you have to have your GPS and your timestamp on in the settings. And when the tournament directors set up these tournaments, they set those parameters. So if you were to take a fish at say 301 or 303, it would automatically get denied because it wouldn't be within that parameters they set. So we submitted the fish, it got accepted. Well, as luck would have it, we ended up winning that tournament, getting first place, and it was really that last fish at the end of the day. So that was kind of the controversy, having a little bit of a gray area as far as interpretation of the rules. And again, if you want to see these videos in some more detail, like I mentioned, I did put them all in a playlist below. But really what happened was I was not feeling it with this gray area. You know, this ultimately was a fun tournament, just getting people together, enjoying this new format, winning some cool prizes, winning some cash. So for me personally, with that little bit of gray area, I just said, you know what, it's okay. We'll forfeit that last fish. We'll give the rightful winner the kayak, the trophy, and yeah, and that's what we did. Everything worked out. We did still get second place, which was great. Overall, no complaints. Fun tournament, fun format. I hope they do it again next year out here in California especially, and we'll definitely be there. Tournament number 6 actually finds us right back at the same body of water, Lake Berryessa. This is for the YAKA series. So being the next tournament, we had an idea as to what these fish were doing, what kind of mood they were in. We're pretty much set on small swim baits, A-rigs, and like we do, we get there a day early to pre-fish. We're met by our buddy Mike Ensign, and we go out there and have some fun pre-fishing, seeing what the bite's like. Believe it or not, it was like the second cove that I pulled into on this day of practice that was loaded with fish. Loaded even more so than the previous tournament where we caught a ton of them. My graph was lighting up every cast with different baits. We were catching one. I think we caught like 3 fish in that cove, and that was the big question right there. Do we want to beat these fish up or do we want to save them for the tournament? And what we decided was to save them for the tournament. So we left that area, we went fishing into some different areas, tried some different things, caught a few more fish, had a nice lunch break, and tried sardines for the first time with Mike. That was an interesting experience. And then right at the end of the day, right before practice ended, caught my PB spot at the time on a little swim bait. So yeah, even though we found that mega load of fish in that cove, we were catching fish in a few other areas. I had a few other areas marked. I was feeling pretty confident for this tournament. Well, tournament day comes around, we make our way to the spot, and wouldn't you know, desert. That massive school of fish completely gone. I still had hope that they might show up just like they showed up in the previous tournament, but we stayed there maybe 2.5 hours. Nothing showed up, and I decided to hightail it out there, and that's what we did. We junk fished, but it was looking bad. I think we had about 2 hours left in the tournament. We were sitting in a spot near where we caught that big spotted bass the day before. Get a few fish on the A-rig, but again, nothing crazy on the graph. I think these are random fish. Decide to leave, but before we leave, we make one more cast. We get bit, and as luck would have it, a school of fish had just moved into this cove. Everyone actually had left already. That keeps us there the rest of the day, and we just go to town on this school with an A-rig, probably the best A-rig bite I've had in California in a long time. 3 hooks in California, 2 teasers, but didn't matter. They were eating it real good. Get our limit, call up a few times, and get another top 5, get a 3rd place finish at Lake Berryessa. So certainly we'll take that, win a nice chunk of change, and that's 2 solid tournaments in a row. So finally getting a little momentum in the tournament season going. On to tournament number 7. We're back at the California Delta, launching out of Paradise Point. This is another YAKA event. Shout out to our guy, Mr. Brandon, aka Bam Miller, for lodging us, letting us stay at his place for the weekend. And always shout out, not just for this tournament, but for really every tournament, to Terrence, aka Santa Claus, for supplying the beverages. It was a good time just hanging out at Bam's place, rigging up baits, drinking some beer, hanging out with the fellas. And we all got there early like we do for practice the day before the tournament. tournament, and it was blowing. My gosh, it was blowing. It was 25, 30 mile an hour winds with 40, 45 mile an hour gusts. I wasn't feeling it, but our buddy Mike wanted to go out and fish just because he doesn't get to fish a lot. And I tried to be a good friend and say, all right, I'll suck it up. We'll go out there and fish. And it worked out. You know, the wind was pretty bad, but we found some protected areas. Caught some fish, actually caught some punch fish, some crankbait fish, but no size. No size, and that again is the thing on the Delta. You're gonna have to find areas with better quality fish to compete in these tournaments. So tournament day, we decided to wing it. We head to a new part of the Delta, and this is kind of where we spin out a little bit as far as tournament momentum goes. We're fishing too fast. We did catch one on the old Berkeley Bullet Pop. And then we caught a nice fish, a really good fish actually, on a Booyah Pad Crasher, way up shallow. But those two fish, after that, it was pretty lean. It was tough. Again, made the same mistake we did at Shasta, and we kind of spun out. We covered way too much water. We're spending too much time on the motor and not actually sitting down and methodically fishing, picking areas apart, and wasted a lot of the day. We're almost 6 miles from the ramp where we have to be back by a certain time, and we do turn a corner and see a ton of fish, some really big fish, and most of them on beds. And that's where we took the dagger right there. We spent the rest of our day trying to catch those bedding fish. The fish that really would have done well for us, got us a really good score had we put them in the boat, but that's how bed fishing goes sometimes, guys, especially in these tournaments. You can spend an hour, hour and a half on a fish, and before you know it, you gotta head back. And that's exactly what happened. We spent way too much time on these bed fish, didn't get a single one, and we come in shy of a limit. That being said, tough day for me. I think one of the coolest things about this tournament was our buddies, Aldi Waldy, Dutcher, and Mr. Obedy Williams take 1, 2, 3 at this tournament. I've never seen anything like it before, so shout out to those guys for dominating everyone and doing a 1, 2, 3 sweep. Tournament number 8. This is actually all the way in New York. We make our annual trip to New York, this time a little bit later than what I typically do for a trip to New York. We usually go in the early spring, but this time we're in June. It's still a great time to go and fish in New York. Fish are still on bed, fish are post-spawn, they're shallow, they're aggressive, and this was actually an NYKBF event on Cayuga Lake, which I've mentioned times before. I consider my home lake because when we do go to New York, we're about 5 minutes from Cayuga Lake, and arguably one of the best fisheries in the country. So very excited for this tournament. Have a couple of days of practice, and we cycle through the usual suspects of baits. You know, we're throwing jigs, chatterbaits, some glides, but the Bobby D spinnerbait, this is a finesse spinnerbait with a little swim bait trailer. That was our bread and butter. That's what we were getting our better quality fish out in these grass flats on Cayuga Lake. And pre-fish, we caught some really big ones. It was kind of exciting. I thought, you know, going into this tournament, we had a really good chance to putting up 95, maybe 100 inches on that spinnerbait. But just like tournaments go, tournament day shows up and it's tough. These fish seem to have moved, shifted, changed. I'm not even sure what's going on. It was like I couldn't not get bit the days before, and then come tournament day, first few hours, I think we only had 1 or 2 keepers. You know, by 11 o'clock, I'm already thinking, oh man, this is a bummer. I'm even going up shallow with a drop shot, just totally abandoning plan A, and even the shallow stuff wasn't working. So go back out to our grass flat. I'm thinking these fish couldn't have really gone anywhere except maybe a few hundred yards left or right or wherever. So we just kind of go searching, blind casting, and eventually we hit a stretch where these fish seemed to relocate, reposition, and that was really the deal. Once we found those fish again, the spinnerbait came back into play, the wind picked up a little bit, and we filled out our limit quick. We called up a few times, and we ended up with a solid finish, just one out of the money, get a 6th place finish, but great way to salvage the day, to kind of stick with your guns, stick with your game plan, not lose hope, and that's ultimately what got us that 6th place finish. And then on top of that, always good to go back to New York, catch up with some old friends, meet some new people. I think one of the really cool things about the NYKBF series in New York is after the tournament, they always set up the awards at a brewery or a restaurant, and this one so happened to be at Wolfie's restaurant right on the lake, and they did their awards there, so cool to hang out there and catch up with some friends after that tournament. Tournament number 9, we're back in California, and now we are at New Melones Reservoir, again a reservoir that has suffered from this serious drought that has hit California. The lake is super low and is fishing completely different than it has in years past. We make our way there, we get there a day early, we do our pre-fish, and it actually went pretty good. We were catching fish on a jig, catching them on an A-rig, catching them on a drop shot. The bites seemed to be wide open, so to speak. You know, you could do what you wanted to catch these fish, but still, for tournaments, pre-fish, you're looking for at least one bigger fish, some better quality, and I just didn't find it in pre-fish. Just a lot of small fish. So on tournament day, we decided to do what we do when we have a bad pre-fish, is just go exploring, go fishing, try some new water, and that's what we did. Caught a few on the jig. Again, going back to our our Kitech finesse jig with the chickerbug trailer, and it's just slow. You know, we're grinding out, we're covering water, getting a bite here or there, but we have not gotten our limit yet. And I think at this point it's about 12 o'clock. It is the weekend, it is the summer, so this lake gets bumping with some recreational boaters, some wakeboarders, and that causes a lot of this water to stir up. And what you notice in places like this in the summer is when that water gets churned up from boat traffic, you'll see these mud lines on the bank. They're very defined. It's a very stark transition from that dingy, muddy water to the clear water that it typically holds. And a pattern, a thing that we've done in the past and is pretty well known, is when that happens, some of these fish will actually go up into the mud line, almost use it as shade or cover for ambush, and you can catch them in multiple ways. And what we decided to do was get a crankbait out, a dredger, something that'll get on the bottom, grind that bank right on that mud line. And one of the craziest non-catches that I had all year happened within the first maybe 10-20 minutes of fishing this. We threw it up on that mud line, we hooked into a smaller fish, and I'm telling you, a magnum spot tried to eat the fish that we had on this crankbait. I wish I had better footage of it. We have some footage. I have no clue how big that spotted bass was, but it tried to eat a 12-inch bass, if that says anything. Didn't get him in the boat, but a good positive sign to keep throwing this crankbait. We do just that. We end up throwing this the rest of the afternoon, and we catch our limit. We cull up a few times. Fish are shallow, fish are on that mud line. And again, a solid finish, nothing epic, but salvage the day, salvage the tournament, salvage points honestly for AOY for Yakka bass, and we can leave that one with our head held high. Tournament number 10, we're back on the California Delta for a California Bass Nation specialty event. This is one that's been a lot of fun the past couple of years. California Delta summertime, frogs only. So this tournament, all kayaks, you can only fish frogs, hollow-bodied frogs that is. This one was interesting in that it was so dang tough. I don't know what the deal was, but it seems like every time we have these tournaments where you only can throw frogs, that's like exactly what the fish don't want to eat. Now really for this one wasn't the fact that they weren't eating it, it was just there's so many small fish coming up and pecking at that frog. I'm talking 6 to 10 inches. We missed a ton of fish, which I believe were those small fish. And for these tournaments, it's only a 3-fish limit, so catching 3 fish was going to be a big deal. We grinded it out all day. I mean, my arm was about to fall off by the end, and we could only scrape together 2 fish, both of which came on a Bobby's Perfect Frog in this white color. I think a lot of those big ones were hunkered down, but we did get 2, and this tournament was interesting in that the winner was the only one that came in with their 3-fish limit. So a tough one on the Delta, but still a fun event to attend. But even with those 2 fish, we still managed to get in the top 6 on a really stingy day on the California Delta. Tournament number 11 back on the Delta just a few weeks later, and my oh my, how the bite can change. We pre-fished for this event. It's a Yakka bass specialty event. This one didn't count for AOY standings. This was the Big Bass Brawl, and it was Clear Lake versus the Delta, meaning those 2 bodies of water were the ones you could fish for this tournament. Man, I guess I need to start reading the rules a lot more carefully, because we went into this tournament with a misconception of the rules for whatever reason. And again, if you want to see the details of these tournaments and how we goofed up in this one, you can go to the actual tournament itself in the playlist. But what I thought was the tournament rules were that it was your 3 biggest fish. So your 3 biggest fish would win the tournament, and that was not the case. It was first, second, third place would be your overall biggest fish, which makes sense. Anyways, that aside, had a great day of fishing. We caught a lot of fish on the Chapo in the Maverick color. Nothing huge, but definitely getting some good bites. And then the big moment was when that bite changed. When that thing seemed to stop getting bit, we slowed down, we picked up a live target frog in this black and blue color, and it did not take long to get bit on that. One of which was a monster bass for me. Easily the biggest bass that I caught all season on that frog. Made a cast into some toolies. After 2 twitches, it got smoked. And you know, when you get into a fish that size, when you set the hook on a frog, you know right away that you got a donkey on. Got that fish in the boat, got it in the net. Like I said at the beginning of the video, that adrenaline rush, that feeling of landing a big fish in a tournament, nothing like it. So super pumped after that, was really excited and just fished hard the rest of the day with that frog. The tide was setting up perfect. They were getting under the trees. We were casting, skipping that frog under the trees. We caught a few more really big fish. I think our best 3 were like 63 inches or something like that. And at this point, with me not knowing the actual rules, I thought we had won the tournament. Of course, that wasn't how it went, and it was just your single biggest fish. But it still worked out in that one big fish, which I'm guessing was probably 8.5 pounds. Got a second place for that tournament. A nice payday, nice chunk of change, which was good. Essentially bounced back from a couple of mediocre tournaments prior to a solid finish for this one. Tournament number 12. We're back at Lake Berryessa again. I think this is our 3rd stop there. This was a California Bass Nation event. This event I specifically wanted to fish because this was my only route, my only way to get back to the Bassmaster Kayak Championship, Knoxville, Tennessee on Lake Chickamauga for 2023. Essentially what had to happen at this tournament was it was was their last regular season event of the year. We didn't fish the entire series, but we still had a chance to make the top 50 in AOY standings for this tournament, which would qualify you for their Tournament of Champions on Clear Lake later in the year, which they'd be taking the top 5 to go to the Bassmaster Kayak Championship. So the goal of this tournament at Lake Berryessa was to do well enough to get us into the top 50 for the AOY standings, qualify for the TOC, and then take it from there. Pre-fish went well, found an area right off the get-go that was loaded with fish, just as it always seems to happen at Lake Berryessa. You search miles and miles of water, but at any point, one cove could be loaded with fish, and that's exactly what we found in practice. Had a few bites, caught a big one, and we decided to leave, cover some more water. Found another area across the lake with some nice grass. Had a few good bites in there, and then we even caught one at the end on an A-rig on another spot. So I'm feeling really good about our pre-fish going into tournament day. I'm thinking 5 fish will be no problem, and the ones that we were catching were better quality, but just like it's happened many times before this season, we show up on tournament day, that cove not as loaded as it was before. I do think it was a timing deal. Around 7:30 the day before we were getting bit, so we were out there a little bit early for tournament day, and we decided to stay at least till 8 o'clock, wait for those fish to show up. Wind picks up, they eventually show up, and just couldn't get on them. These fish are schooling fish, chasing bait, and they can be doing that in like 80 to 100 foot of water, and every so often you'd see them come up and bust, and I just couldn't get my bait in front of them fast enough. We missed our opportunity, we missed that window. We catch one dink out of there, and everything kind of dies off. So mid-morning we decide to leave, go to our grass spot, and this is again where things kind of came unraveled. We're in a little bit of a panic mode. We finally get bit. We try to rush the fish into the net. It comes off. Just a tough feeling, tough blow to have when you don't even have 2 fish in the boat and day's halfway done. So losing that fish kind of hurt. We kept fishing, catch some pike minnow, catch a smallmouth, we catch some unders. Just does not seem to be our day. It's really stressing me out at this point because I think I just need to get like top 25, top 30 for this tournament to get into the top 50 AOY standings. I've just like kind of ruined my chance, I feel like, at this point. And to make matters worse, shortly after, we're throwing our top water, which by the way, was the cane walker. Got our big bites in practice, got some of our bites on tournament day, and we miss a big one. Big one comes up, absolutely misses the bait completely. And at this point, I'm just like, oh man, we're done. This is over, just not meant to be. We're gonna have to just take this L. Bad mindset to have, bad mentality, but we continue on to fish. We're just covering new water, trying different things. We throw that cane walker out towards the end of the day. Wouldn't you know, lands on one's head, we get bit, we get it to the boat. I didn't weigh the fish, but I can say in a lot of confidence that was the biggest spot, beating the previous big spot we had at Lake Berryessa in the spring. That was our new PB spot. Almost one big fish of the tournament, but that was our 3rd keeper of the day. And that fish right there proved to be crucial in that it got us into, I think, 21st place for the tournament. It bumped us barely into the top 50 for AOY, and we qualified for the TOC at Clear Lake later in the year. So even though it was a tough tournament, I am so grateful to have that last spotted bass get in the boat and keep us in the hunt for qualifying for Bassmaster Championship in 2023. Tournament 13, arguably the biggest tournament each year for us, and this is the one that we've been doing for the past 5 years. We actually started out this tournament video showing the past 5 years of memories of trips to Clear Lake. This one always happens in mid-August, and it's not only a big tournament for the historic reasons, but it's a big tournament in that there's a lot of tournaments going on all at once. We have the West Coast Championship, 3 KBF events. We have a Chris Laird Memorial 2-day event. We have a Lakeport Bait and Tackle event on Friday. So it's so many tournaments, a lot of money in entry fees, but it's 3 days of tournament fishing, always a good time with the crew. Fishing typically is really good on Clear Lake in August, and just one we always look forward to. Well, just like every other body of water aside from the Delta in California that has suffered from this drought, Clear Lake was no exception, and the water was very low, the lake had changed, the fish had changed, and the big story with practice was the bite was tough. Catching 5 a day, again, might put you in contention to not only make top 10, but maybe to win the tournament. We pre-fished a couple of days, we skunked on day 1, caught I think maybe 1 or 2 fish on day 2, so leading into the tournament, I am completely at a loss. I don't know what to do. We wing it, we try a new area. We actually end up catching a couple of fish on a bait that this time of year can get bit pretty good if they're on that bite, and it's just a custom black and blue chatterbait with a swim Senko trailer. And those 2 early fish gave me a lot of confidence, but we went hours and hours after that without a bite. And we find ourselves with 2 hours left in the tournament. We have 2 fish on the board. We make a cast, we get number 3. I'm thinking, okay, great, we need 2 more fish to fill out a limit, and it just doesn't happen. We have some GoPro issues overheating. Clear Lake this time of year is like 100 degrees, the algae stinks, the lake smells like garbage. Not the most enjoyable time on the water, but we just can't get our 4th and 5th keeper. End up catching some big catfish as a tease and a little insult to injury. But believe it or not, even after day 1 of 3 fish, 3 good fish mind you, we're actually like in 23rd place place out of like 120 anglers. So that just goes to show how tough the fishing was, that 3 keepers put you in the 20s, and I think there was over 50 skunks. The story was that lake was fishing super tough. The rest of the tournament was not memorable. Our Saturday, Sunday of tournament fishing, I think Saturday we only caught 1, Sunday we only caught 1, and overall it was just a really disappointing showing for myself personally, and even the rest of the crew at Clear Lake for this past year. But again, like I mentioned, that trip is not just for the fishing. These tournaments, these experiences are what we all have referred to as our vacation time, and this was no exception. This one again is the big one of the year, so we always get a nice Airbnb. We always get together, go out, eat some good food, drink some good beer, have some laughs. Despite the terrible fishing, another epic, memorable, great time at Clear Lake. Tournament number 14. Man, we're getting close to the end here, but tournament number 14, we're right back at Clear Lake. This is for the California Bass Nation Championship, the TOC, the one we qualified for barely with that heroic, miraculous spotted bass being our 3rd fish back a couple tournaments ago. So top 50 fish this TOC at Clear Lake. It's a couple weeks after the YAB West Coast KBF event where it was pretty much a grinder for everybody. And unfortunately, there's no change in the fish, no change in the bite. We think that maybe the lake will turn around, things will get better. Didn't seem to be the case. I caught 1 fish in practice on a crankbait. The census is, yes, it has been tough. It is the same. It is fishing really, really stingy, and 5 fish each day for this 2-day tournament might put you in the top 5, which again was the goal, because out of the 50-man field, the top 5 would qualify for the Bassmaster Championship in 2023. So top 5, that was our only goal of this tournament. Day 1, we just decided to throw a Hail Mary, try a new place. We're gonna throw the crankbait all day because that's the only hint, the only bite that we have. Still keeping an open mind, but within the first 10 minutes of the tournament, day 1, we get bit on the crankbait, and that really solidified what I had as a game plan for the rest of that day at least, and that was to throw that once again Fritz Side 7 in that ghost minnow color. That was the crankbait that was getting all of our bites both days. We get a nice limit. We even call up a few times on day 1, sitting in 7th place, doing good, in position to make a top 5 with another solid finish on day 2. And again, with all these tournaments, especially the Clear Lake ones, always a good time with the fellas, trying new places, heading to little dive bars, stuff like that. But heading into day 2, things changed. The fish that we were catching off of one island on the southern end of the lake just seemed to have left. We get a few bites, nothing big. We lose a couple of fish. We lose a couple of baits. Things are kind of coming undone like they've done in the past. I think we caught our 2nd fish on a drop shot at like 1 o'clock, and then we catch 1 more with like 30 minutes left to go on a crankbait. And we only come in with 3 fish on day 2, and unfortunately that falls us down the standings, I think into 13th or 14th place. And we don't make that heroic comeback. We do not crack top 5. So one of the goals of 2022 was to qualify for the Bassmaster Championship. It's just what it is. It's reality. It happens, and we did not qualify, but I know that the top 5 guys from California that made it to the 2023 Bassmaster Championship on Chickamauga, definitely be rooting them on, cheering them on to have a solid finish there. And tournament number 15, finally, the last tournament of 2022, we find ourselves again at Lake Berryessa. Man, I feel like half the tournaments have been at Lake Berryessa, but this is for the YAB Tournament of Champions 2-day event at Lake Berryessa, open launch style. And Berryessa this time of year in the fall typically is really tough. We had our Tournament of Champions there last year, same time of year. A lot of schooling fish, suspended fish, chasing bait, anywhere from 20 to 100 foot of water. The biggest thing for me on this particular tournament and this time of year is it's not one where you can just go down the bank with a drop shot, a worm, a jig, and beat the bank all day and pick up 5. It's just not gonna work like that. You need to go offshore, use your electronics to find these fish, find these schools of fish, and if you can do that, you can get right in a hurry. So this one was the last tournament video, of course. Going old school with the truck camping with the fellas. We get a campsite right at Puda Creek. Aldi, Dutch, Mike, and Terrence. We venture over to Turtle Rock, pretty cool place near Lake Berryessa to get some grub, get fueled up for day 1. Day 1 shows up, and it's tough, just like we had thought. It was a grinder all day for me personally. Everything we caught on day 1 was on a little Kitech jig, that same Kitech jig, but we changed up the trailers to something a little bulkier. Kind of a weird thing in that a lot of these fish are bait-oriented, bait chasing, and we threw a lot of bait imitators on day 1, but we couldn't get bit. The only thing we get bit on was a green pumpkin jig, which I don't know exactly why that was the deal, but I think a lot of the time, you know, we made a million casts. Eventually it would land around a school of fish, and I think they just kind of get competitive, they get interested, and they'd eventually eat it. And that's what we got all of our bites on. We got a limit, which was amazing. Again, I thought catching 5 each day would put you in contention, and we got our limit. We culled up a couple of times. We caught a nice spotted bass right at the end of the day, and coming in after day 1, I think we're sitting right around 10th or 11th place with that limit. Again, about half the field not coming in with limits, so the fishing is tough, and sitting in a good place, sitting in a place where if we have a really good day, I'm thinking 90 inches on day 2, we might be able to steal a win on this one. Well, day 2 comes around and the conditions are completely different. A lot windier, weather and forecasted to get pretty dangerous out there with 25-30 mile an hour winds. When that lake gets rough and that wind comes from the north or the south, it can get pretty sketchy. And we caught a few in the morning on an A-rig. We threw our jig, not a single bite, but again, with this wind and the water churning up, the A-rig just seemed right, and it was the right choice. We pretty much had that locked in our hand all day, but about 9:30, 10 o'clock, that main lake where we had all of our fish just was getting too crazy for me. The waves were insane. I mean, they were 4 to 5 foot at some points. They were rolling over, white capping. I've flipped before. It is not fun. Just kind of steered myself into the only cove that was protected on that side of the lake, and we get to that cove and it's basically make or break there. We're spending the rest of our day there no matter what. Can't fish anywhere else. It's just too dangerous in my opinion, but as luck would have it, there were some fish pushed into that cove. We get bit on the A-rig, a nice smallmouth. Then we catch a nice spotted bass. We keep grinding out some fish, and we do get one more bite to finish out the day. A nice largemouth, kind of a bonus fish. I think it was almost the big fish of the tournament, but that largemouth called us up like 4 inches. And for the last tournament, the TOC YAB Bass event on Berryessa, we come in with a solid 3rd place, end the year on a high note. So I will certainly take that. Always good to end the tournament season with some positive vibes and a nice little payday. All right, so guys, that is all 15 tournaments, the recap of every single one in order of 2022. And I've got some stats here. Like I mentioned, I want to tell you guys exactly, some of the entry fee costs, the winnings, the overall, profit or loss. So we've got 15 tournaments, kayak tournaments that is, that we did this past year. We entered all side pots, so some of these tournaments will have like big bass, they'll have like yak pot, bonus pots, stuff like that. And overall, tournament fees alone, we spent $3,642.28 for all tournament entry fees. Our overall winnings, cashed checks for all 15 tournaments combined. We cashed checks in 5 tournaments, giving us an overall payday of winnings of $5,383, giving us a net or overall profit of $1,740.72. Now again, keep in mind these are just entry fees compared to winnings. This is not cost of travel, lodging, food, etc. But always good when you're in the green as far as entry fees to winnings at the end of the year. Now as far as overall grade, my overall grade for my 2022 tournament season, we're gonna make up a scale 0 to 100, 0 being the worst ever tournament season ever, maybe you didn't even catch a fish, 100 being a perfect tournament season, which no one has done because that would be winning every single one, winning AOY, and I don't think that's ever happened kayak-wise that I know of. And just for reference, if you get like a 90 out of 100, that means you have multiple wins throughout the season, and then maybe even AOY, something like that would bump you up into the 95 plus range. And then, going down to the lower end of the spectrum, a 30 out of 100 would be you didn't cash checks in any tournaments, you skunked a few times, it was a bad one, and anything below that just gets even worse. So given those reference points 0 to 100, and then just putting into context my overall season statistics of 2022, which included of course the $5,383 in tournament money won. We made 11 top 20s out of the 15 tournaments. We made 7 top 10s. We made 5 top 5s, with the best finish being a 2nd place at Lake Berryessa. Our worst finish of the year was 43rd on the California Delta YAB Bass event. So my overall grade for my season is going to be an 81 out of 100 or B minus. We didn't win any tournaments this year, no first place finishes, no AOY awards. We had some solid top 5s. We had overall a solid tournament season, just nothing phenomenal. So I think 81 is a fair grade to give myself. And I don't know, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and more so let me know in the comments below your tournament season, maybe even just your fishing season. Give yourself a grade below and some rationale why you think your grade is what your grade is. And then just to touch on one more thing, the 2023 season, the next season, the upcoming season, which I'm so pumped for. Kayak fishing, kayak tournaments are getting so big. There's so many circuits out there, whether it's local trails, national events, so many options, so many opportunities, and I'm really excited next year to fish as many as I can. We've got our local stuff here. New York trips, we're going to continue to go to New York every year. I think next year we're probably going to do 3 or 4 trips to New York. I did just see that the Hobie BOS series is actually going to be on Cayuga Lake at the end of June, so definitely have that one penciled in. And then I'm thinking maybe a trip to Texas or Florida or somewhere in the country, maybe even up north in the summer for a Mississippi River event, something like that. I'm thinking a trip's in order to so-called a random place that we haven't been to in a while, leaning toward Texas and trying to fish one of those tournaments out there if the stars align. So 2023, still figuring out the exact schedule, but all I know is I'm going to compete and fish in as many tournaments as I possibly can, and hopefully another solid year. But guys, that is going to do it for today's video. Recap of the entire 2022 tournament season. Something a little different, I know, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it. One more point just to hit on. If you guys are new new to tournaments or if you're looking to get into the kayak fishing tournament scene, yes, the competition is one thing. It's great to be competitive. It's great to, strive to do well in AOY standings or series championships. But there is an aspect about it for me personally that I think is very relatable to a lot of guys that tournament fish out here and everywhere in the country, is kind of the social aspect of tournament fishing. I'll say this, you guys have seen on my channel this past year, these tournament videos are not just me fishing the tournaments. They're hanging out with a group of guys that I've become really good friends with out here, whether it's truck camping, Airbnbs, hanging out with them before the tournaments, getting to know them. And one thing that is so cool about not just tournament fishing, not just kayak fishing, but fishing in general, is it brings people that you would never be friends with otherwise together. And it's just because of that passion of fishing, and that's what all of us have. The group of guys that I hang out with all love fishing, all are super passionate. Apparently they all like beer too, so that doesn't hurt. So that is the video for today, guys. Again, let me know in the comments below your tournament grade for your season. And other than that, hope you enjoyed this one, and I will catch you guys in the next video.